Just testing my audio. Do people hear? All right.
We can hear fine. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Hoping everyone found parking okay today. Right? Did you get a good seat? We're so happy to have you here in the space with us. I'm just going to allow one more moment or so. It seems like we just have a couple more left.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, Smita, I think we are ready to go.
Okay,
So,
I have the PowerPoint on. Can you see the PowerPoint?
I can. It's actually in the mode before presentation. So if you can click
Yeah.
the presentation button.
Yeah.
And while she's doing that, I'll introduce myself and then I'll turn the mic over to her. We are so happy to have you in this space today. My name is LaTanya Lawrence. I am one of the consultants at SERC, the State Education Resource Center, and I'm so happy you were able to find time in your schedules to join us today. We have about 5 questions that we're hoping to go through. But before we get into that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Smita.
Can you see the PowerPoint now?
I can. This will work. This will work for me.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Smita. I'm also a consultant at SERC, the state, and I'm going to support Tanya with our presentation today.
And just checking with the participants, if you can show me that you know how to use your reaction button, because we are going to need that to raise our hands. So if you could just use that to raise your hand. There we go. We got some celebration thumbs up. Yep. We have professional Zoomers on the line. I love it. Thank you so much. All right. So this is going to be the flow. We have the presentation slides so that you could see the questions that we are asking. For each question, our goal is to collect everyone's response, right? As the commissioner and several of my colleagues have echoed, we are trying to capture every voice because your voices matter, right? And so we're going to do that by answering questions using the chat feature, right? And once we've collected, we have about 20 in here. Smita, I'm looking at, in terms of co-hosts, we have about 18
participants.
right? Yeah. Yeah, we have about 18 participants. So we're looking to go to that magic number of 18 people who have responded in the chat before we open it up to the room to add on. And we're going to spend about 15 minutes per question. It worked really well last night, but let's see, we might have to be flexible today. So again, thank you so much for coming out today. And this is our public and stakeholder input session that has really been a co-facilitation between State Education Resource Center and the State Department of Education. And so as you know, just echoing what was shared earlier today, the federal government has requested that each state submit a plan addressing how to use those ARP ESSER funds, right? And so what that looks like is we're really looking at these 5 priorities. Being able to describe the state's current status and needs, being able to safely reopen schools and sustaining that safe operation, being able to maximize state level funding to support our students who need it the most, supporting the LEAs, the local education agencies, for those of you who are not educators, in planning for a meeting that meets students' needs. Supporting the educator workforce and what that looks like. And so as we go into each question, you'll see that a little bit more intimately. What I'm gonna do right now, I'm just gonna ask, I have 2 people who have their hands raised. Do you have any questions before we begin? Because I don't wanna just lower your hand assuming that you don't. Are
If
there
one
any
of those,
questions?
Tanya, Tanya, if one of those is me, I just put in a note that the raise the hand is in the participants feature on my Zoom, not under the reactions icon.
Okay, thank you for that, because that definitely speaks to what Greg said about having different versions. So if you have a more recent version of Zoom, you're going to see the reaction button. To John's point, it will have the reactions as well as the raise hand feature. If you're using a less recent version of Zoom, can you tell where my mind is? If you're using a less recent version of Zoom, you're going to find the reaction to raise your hand under participants. So you'll click on participants and you'll see like a small little piece under there that has the raise hand feature and a couple other things like yes, no, and I think a check mark and a X. So I'm going to lower the one hand that I see. Thank you so much for that, Smita. So let's get on to that first priority, right? So we know that the State Department of Education so far has really prioritized providing support, guidance, and resources. They've been able to address the digital divide by providing free access to those digital resources. And they are committed to addressing the social emotional needs of our students, right? And we've seen this through many efforts launched through the Accelerate CT Task Force. So with that in mind, right, and given the progress of promising practices that have been coming out very frequently from CSCE in the last year, think about what are some of the unidentified needs that they may not know of, right? Because in particular, they want to know what needs are you noticing in your specific areas of the state that should be accounted for when it comes to those student populations that are most impacted by the pandemic. You can answer this question by clicking on your chat. You should see that at the bottom of the screen. I would like it if you could start your response with the number 1 and then put your answer. We will be monitoring the chat to make sure that we have 20 responses before we open it up for public comment. All right, so let's get started. And I do see I have one participant.
With a raised hand?
Yes, no, I have one participant who says in the chat, Smita, that they are driving.
Yeah,
so when we get to 19, I'm gonna ask iPhone if you have a comment to bring that in.
Yeah, I have said that they can answer by speaking on the iPhone if they want to, and we can record it. We have two raised hands.
Yes. So we had those raised hands and then they went down. So I'm just gonna ask the first person. I'm unable to identify what your first name is. I'm gonna spell it BIANKAKORTLAN. Can you unmute? Do you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good morning, Latanya
Good morning.
and Smita and everyone. I'm Bianca Cortland Cox. I'm from the, I'm not an educator. I'm I'm member of the Connecticut Association for the Gifted. And I would like to mention that I'm very happy to see the equity issue is supposed to focus all our discussion today, because that, I think, was such an important what turned out to be a problem, a challenge under the digital learning situation. And a lot of students were not able to even access the classrooms for several reasons. The equipment, the lack of connection, all kinds of difficulties, parents working at different times. And I representing students who are traditionally, especially in those underserved communities who experienced most of these issues with connectivity I mentioned, who were basically invisible, and they are even invisible in our regular classrooms. And these are high achieving students, high ability students in underserved communities. In Connecticut, we didn't have any funding for programs for their needs since 1997. So I would like to say, if we could pay attention to these students and under this plan, direct some of the funds to focus on their needs, that would be amazing for
Yes.
us and for the state, because these students always motivate all kids in the classroom if they are given
Absolutely.
voice.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing that into the space, Bianca. And my apologies because I might not have been clear. I was really looking to see if anyone had questions before we began.
Sorry.
I really love your response, and I'm hoping that you can capture that in the chat for me.
Okay.
So just put the number 1 and put your response.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bianca. So how many are you noticing, Smita? I'm seeing a lot of folks have responded, and we have about 3 in our number of 20, possibly 4 people who do not count as participants. So we're looking at that magic number of 16.
I'm noticing about
2.
about 7.
Yeah. All right, so we're almost at 50%. Keep those responses coming in. And to Bianca's point, this is one way that we achieve equity, when we listen to all voices and capture them in a way. And hopefully, I'm looking for an opportunity for us to expand on those voices, right? And that can be done in a couple ways. When we open up for the public to comment, there's another way that you can do that by either speaking into the space to add on to something someone's already said in the chat, or you could also say, at David Radcliffe, I totally agree with you, right? That will help us draw emphasis to those comments.
So I'm noticing about 9, Latanya, 9 responses.
Yep, so we are at 50%. Keep those responses coming in. Marissa, I'm noticing your response in the chat. If you could just elaborate a little bit more on what you intended to say. All right, those responses keep coming in. We're almost at 60%. We're at 60%, keep coming. Just waiting for 5 more.
Hi there, Latanya. This is Jen O'Reilly. I'm calling in from my car. I can't really see right now what other people are writing, so I'm just going to sit this one out. And when I'm back at my desk in about 15 minutes, if we're still in this breakout room, I'll be able to contribute. I'm sorry about that.
No apologies at all, Jen. And what I can do, because my goal was to come back to you, so I'm going to rename you as Jen. And my goal was to come back to you. And if you have something that you would like to add, just think about your ideas. We're going to start with you. Would that work for you?
Sure. Again, I just can't see what other folks are saying, so I don't want to be redundant. So I'm happy to contribute. I feel a bit in a vacuum right now. Unfortunately, I'm in charge of parent drop-off today.
No worries at all. So I'll just ask you, Jen, if you're comfortable and you want to share something, but we're not worried about the redundancy. And if there is redundancy in this process, what we're doing is we're coding the responses, right? So if we do see redundancy in responses, that all that does is it draws greater attention to what was said. So don't worry about that at all. All right, I got 6 more responses, Smita. So
Yeah,
again, the question was really just how can we identify some needs that we would like the State Department of Ed to focus on, specifically accounting for needs that support student populations most impacted by the pandemic. Jen, would you like to start us off with your thoughts?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that some of the obstacles that I've encountered in my work with schools in Connecticut is principal time. There's a challenge in getting principals to respond and to identify and to prioritize. And so I think any sort of survey process that is easy and simple and where there's some level of accountability or incentive may help us to gain that information as we compile and make decisions on need. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that into the space, Jen. We really appreciate it. Are there others who would like to add on to ideas that have already been shared or elaborate on their own? You can do so by clicking the raise your hand feature. You can find that under participants. You can also add more in the chat. All right, we have another Smita. I'm so excited. We have another Smita. Smita?
Hi there. Yes, I was excited too because it's a very unusual name. So, can you hear me well?
yes,
Absolutely, we can hear you well. All right,
Okay.
Smita.
So, the one reason that's that I want to bring and request, and maybe hopefully the decision makers will consider is the fact that even though I completely agree with all of the kids need to be back in school, but there is a very small subset of families like myself and my children, because of our medical situation and personal family circumstances, we are still not able to send our children back to school in fall. And the fact that Connecticut, whatever has been said to us from our school district, I live in the Fairfield Public Schools, and last year they opened a remote learning academy to kind of accommodate families like us, which was like a true lifesaver because my children are brilliant, but due to medical issues, nobody has answers to them. And even though things are looking so good in Connecticut, I still don't have answers to how my kids will fare when they're back in school. So I still have to hold them back and not send them back to school. But I am challenged at this point because Connecticut is one of the states that has no option for remote schooling. And the only other option remains is homeschooling, which families like us who have been educated in the traditional school system cannot handle. So this is my humble request, that I'm not saying that I don't want to send my kids back to school ever. I am just overwhelmed with my children's medical issues, plus my family who lives within the country and outside the country who are unable to get vaccinated due to their medical situations. So at this point, the request I wanted to make to the state was that even though parents like us are in a minority, with all the resources that are being used to help all the students that are going back to school, I would be very grateful if the state also accommodates the needs of families like us, where our children need the help too. At this time, there is nothing that's being talked about for families like us, and I know we are in a minority, and we do need the help too. The Fairfield School Systems Remote Learning Academy was a brilliant effort in that direction that kind of gave us a very close, what should I say, ability to stay. It actually was a very close simulation to the traditional school system. Not everybody can handle remote learning, but there are still families. I mean, I want that option to be provided to families who can handle it, because at this point, I am so stressed and worried because I don't know what to do for my children. So that's my humble request, that if you have these additional resources, please look into families like us who desperately need this in point of time. when I have to make a decision between the safety of my child's health or to, go back to school, I have to pick safety first, because I've spoken to the pediatricians, I've spoken to, people, and I'm watching the news
Absolutely.
very closely. Nobody has answers. We are looking in a great position in Connecticut right now, but none of the pandemic is not over. So I do not have the ability to take the risk at this point. And when I look at the neighboring states like Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, all of those states have online public school options. And as much as I agree that in-person, there is no substitute to in-person school, but sometimes the circumstances are such, and I never anticipated to do this for my children. But given what's happened last year, I'm forced to keep requesting for that, because I think this is the closest I can get to keeping my kids in the traditional school system.
Thank you so much for that heartfelt comment, Smita, and bringing that parent perspective into the space. And I just have to tell you, it gave me chills as you shared it. I know I didn't share this at the beginning, but I'm also a mom of 3 beautiful Black unicorns, one who thinks they're a leader. The youngest one is 13-month-old and is trying to run his own virtual academy. And so we're challenged with that, but you brought a very important issue into the space about families with complex medical conditions, or even just other areas of consideration, who are challenged with whether or not they feel safe and comfortable sending their children back to school in the fall. And I assure you that the State Department of Education hears your concerns, and they're going to really work to try to address some of those. So thank you for bringing that into the space. Just looking at time, Smita, I'm gonna call on Louisa, Prince, and then John.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to the next question, okay?
Okay,
Thank you so much, Smita. All right, Louisa, please unmute and bring your voice into the space. Thank you so much. We're happy you can join us today.
Thank you. I'm a community educator in the community in the Waterbury School District, as well as a parent. One of the biggest things I think of is what a lot of people are commenting on is the whole family system. So much of it is focused on, and I fully believe, the kids, which is amazing, but we're forgetting about staff and what they're going through. And we're forgetting about parents and what they're going through, because for a parent to send a child to school and work and be so worried and anxious on how they're going to handle this, and staff worried about themselves and their own families being in school districts, looking at the whole instead of just the one. I think that's an important fact, because as I do these classes, we have like 13-year-olds taking care of their siblings, while mom and dad work, and then what happens to the little siblings when mom and dad are at work and the kids are at school now, but the little ones are too little to be at school. So I know it's a complex thing I'm talking about, but it's such a multi-level matter. That kind of looking at it as a whole family systemic, because I'm a marriage and family therapist also. So kind of looking at the whole instead of just the one, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. We talk about often with educators and even with our families, right? They're like onions and peeling back a layer, right?
Yes.
So even if you're addressing the barrier that the student is trying to access school, right? But then within the family unit, there are other layers of challenges. And I think that definitely came out in your comment today, and definitely in Smita's comment, and of course, those that are coming in the chat. So thank you so much for that. And you'll appreciate that we'll have an opportunity to circle back and go deeper with that in question 5.
Right, because I was going to say also with their language too, because like in Waterbury, we have Brazilians and we have Albanian and we have Spanish and Portuguese, so many different languages, and kind of just to uniform it to like 1 or 2 languages is really difficult, because understanding the cultural aspect of the families also. Because I'm very much truly Portuguese, and the way I work my family is different than somebody else would probably. So
absolutely. And so looking at some of those cultural nuances, and maybe identifying whether or not there might be language barriers, of course. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Louisa. And I'm going to go over to you, John. Thank you so much for joining us in the space. If you can unmute.
Thank you, Latanya. My comment has to do with arts education, which I think is probably not applicable so much to this question, so I'll reserve expanding on that to later. I'm a Board of Ed member and a leader of an arts education nonprofit, But my comment is more in line with supporting parents. Connecticut has a tendency to do things in 166 different ways. And if the State Department of Ed could provide a really well put together, popularized, maybe graphic novel-ish kind of communication strategy to parents who often don't receive information or can't for a variety of reasons, it would help in delivering a consistent message that many, if not most, boards of ed are doing really well at the local level. But then it kind of gets diffused and dispersed and lost. And if the State Department of Ed could bring that all together for parents who may not have other kinds of access, I think that could be a huge support system for parents to calm them. There's a lot of angst, and there could be consistent practice that comes out of that as well for parents and families. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I would reinsert and say you did have good footing in this conversation as an art educator, and I think you're also noting, is that correct, that that might be an area of need to focus on, and I appreciate how you combined that with your concern for how we communicate with families. The art lover in me, yes, I am a painter, you're going to learn that about me today, says yes, can we get graphic novel-ish communications to families that supports those images with the text, right, in a way that's meaningful. I think about some of the infographics that came out from CSDE last year. It really helped us to understand what a reopening should look like, right? And how do we move between the different learning models. So thank you so much for that, John. We're gonna move forward into the next question, Smita. I'm gonna save the chat.
Yes, I also saved it.
Excellent.
Okay, next question, can you see it?
All right, so we talked about this, right? This is already coming out in some of our comments about safely reopening schools. Like, what does that mean? What does it look like to sustain a safe operation, right? So what we know so far is that the State Department of Ed has prioritized keeping our schools open, whether that's in different learning models or fully in person or fully remote, right? Hybrid as well. We know that they've created a suite of resources, tools, and guidance that help districts, families, and communities. We know that they've maintained data on various learning models on the CSDE's data portal in EdSite. I have to tell you, just as a parent and an educator, I was really excited when they had that interactive map that I could just hover over a neighboring school district, my own child's school, and really look at what that attendance looks like, what some of the challenges look like, right? That was really cool. And they've established that in-person learning as a priority for the upcoming school year. So let's think about that. All of the comments we've said already, let's build on those ideas. How might the CSDE best support school districts in sustaining their safe operations and preparing for the fall? Just like the other questions, you can answer this question by putting the number 2 and then your response. And then I'm looking right now, we're up to 21, Smita, but I think we're still around roughly 16 or 17 guests. So we're looking for that number to go up to 16 before we allow comments into the space. Spoken comments, I should say, into the space. So please help us out. Question number 2, add it to the chat.
Put number 2 before your response, so it will help us to know for which question you're responding to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosalind, for modeling that for us.
And thank you.
And Smita, I know we started a little bit early, but we're just a minute early for the next question, so we should be doing good on time.
Okay.
So we are at 25%. Let's keep those responses coming in. %. Almost at 50%. Again, thinking about what does it look like to you if you think about what is the best way that CSDE can support our school districts in sustaining their safe operations, right? So what does the safe reopening look like? Or what does safe preparation for the fall look like? We're at 50%, keep them coming.
I think we're at 60%, Tanya.
Yeah, we have a couple people that responded multiple times, so I'm counting them now.
Okay.
So far I'm seeing 9 individuals have responded. We're just waiting for 5 more. And another thing that you could know too is maybe you don't connect, right, with this comment. Maybe you are coming from a different sector of the state, maybe business professional or faith-based community. You can respond by putting number 2 and no comment. That is a way that we can capture your response as well. Yep, I got 10 responses, so we're almost there. We're at 70%, almost there. And if you are someone who's already responded and you would like to speak into the space,
I just need reception.
you can do that by just raising your hand, use the raise hand feature. And I'm also checking to see with my friend Jen, if you're still on standby, if you want to start with comment. I don't think I got the opportunity to see Jen's response in the chat.
Hi, Latanya. Yeah, no, you did not. I'm still driving.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to check. Okay, so hold on 1 second, Jen.
Okay.
Rosalind has raised her hand.
Yes. Hi, good morning.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Hold on, Rosalind. Hold on,
Sure.
Smita. I was just trying to prompt Jen. Rosalind, did you? Yep, I saw Rosalind already wrote into the chat. So we are going to, I'm just going to count them up one more time, Smita. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, so we're almost there. So while we have a couple others that are still adding their thoughts to the space, we're going to start with Jen, who is unable to type into the chat. And then we're going to go to Rosalind, if that's okay, Smita.
Sure.
All right, Jen, you can unmute. Please bring your voice into the space.
Thanks, Latanya. My immediate thought when I thought about this question was, as a school leader, I would appreciate a forum where I could, I guess, first have an expectation from the state about what that would look like, and then B, have an opportunity to converge and dialogue with my peers to better understand best practices. And perhaps there's an opportunity for the state to facilitate these forums, capture best practices, and share them with districts and school leaders in an effort to have everyone benefit from each other's successes. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. So kind of developing or cultivating a culture of peer mentoring, peer support, peer learning opportunities among educators and leaders in school districts.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that into the space, Jen. Smita, our hand went down, but I don't remember the name of, was it Rosalind?
Yes,
She might have dropped
Yes,
off.
yes,
Are you back with us?
yeah.
Right, first challenge of Zoom. Can I get to the breakout room? You're here.
So good morning. So I saw some thinking, and I've worked in several districts. I think that not having a nurse per school, it's not a good thing. I think it keeps parents from sending their schools, and they're very concerned. So, from what I've seen, usually the city hires the nurses, right? And that happens in a lot of districts. And I think that the state should contribute in terms of giving some guidance, because I think it has to come from the state, because I think whether it's the board of it just hiring the nurses, somehow, some way, I'm not sure why that happens in a lot of districts, but that's going to help the reopening, because a lot of parents don't feel safe. A lot of staff will complain, and there has to be some type of guidance and some type of consistency from the state, giving the freedom that the board of it. I'm not sure how that works. Just hire all the nurses rather than the city.
Yeah. So, and of course, each school district operates differently based on how their charters were established, right? But I think what you brought into the space, Rosalind, is a very unique need, right? So we are still, to the comment Smita made, we are still experiencing the pandemic, right? And as we are starting to, take opportunities to leave our bubbles and engage in school, what are opportunities that CSDE can provide to support school districts and towns and cities in really increasing that medical staff, right? So that we're able to triage some needs on the school district level as they arise. It may help families to know that they have that additional nurse support in their schools. Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that in the space. Do we have anyone else who would like to add another thought or idea that you can add on? I see you guys are doing a great job adding on to your peers in the chat. So kudos to all of you. I love it. It helps us draw more attention to the comments that this group of participants feels are important. Do we have anyone else who'd like to raise their hand and add to the comments that have been made, or bring a new idea we haven't discussed yet in terms of CSDE's role in really helping schools safely reopen for the fall? Yes, Jen. Jennifer Maxon. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, I'm in a hallway, so I and then I'm gonna have to leave because I have to go to class. But I had written in the chat the idea that something that would be, I'm both a teacher and a Board of Ed member, and it would be incredibly helpful to talk about leveraging efficiencies for the state to use the models that some districts have unrolled of remote learning academies, with it's a staff that's fully dedicated to the remote learners. The learners themselves are all full remote students. So it's a single type of teaching model. And districts, many did it this year, that we can't financially sustain it. And I say that as a board member, not as a teacher. And for the state to take one of those models, or a combination of those models, and roll out a remote learning academy for this coming school year would be transformative, not only in the delivery equitably and with access to everyone for that option. It would be a very tangible way to support districts for these medically fragile students for whom this pandemic is not over. And that would be a very concrete way, tangible way that the state could support districts, would be in that idea. And again, they wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Several districts have already done that this year very successfully, in a way that hybrid learning did not work optimally for anyone, whether it's the most gifted students, the students who struggled the most disengaged, the staff members trying to put together the lessons. Hybrid learning was suboptimal, and a dedicated academy like that, or whatever institution, would be incredibly valuable to teachers, to staff, and to districts.
Absolutely. So
And I
thank
have
you
to
so
go to
much.
class now. So
We
sorry, I
appreciate
can't
your
stay
time
around
in
for
the
more
space,
conversation.
Jen. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time in the space. So yeah,
I have to say
absolutely.
thank you for asking us for our input.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you so much for that, Jenna. She really emphasized the need for the State Department of Ed to possibly support on the local or maybe on the state level virtual learning academies for our kiddos. So Smita, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna take Bianca and then we're gonna go to question 3.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Bianca, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. As I listened to the discussion about the professional development, the need to develop social emotional learning, to make the kids, and now this great idea with the academy, we are trying to also make kids feel safer coming to school and their parents feeling safer to send them to schools. It occurred to me that there is something, there is a pedagogy of that favors strength-based learning and interest-based learning versus very often exercised, especially when the systems are tired, deficit learning, based learning, just making up for what the kids don't know yet. And I think if we focus on things that are interest-based, it requires a bit more individualization, but digital learning makes that possible. Then the kids will be excited. Also, that will help us with the social emotional learning aspect of teaching. And kids who get engaged because they are asked to respond to the question or to respond to an assignment with something that's interest-based, it's very easy to do. You just tell kids, this is your assignment, do whatever in the area of your interest. Kids love it. They get engaged, and really interested child, whether it's a high ability student or it's a special ed student, everybody has some interest. We can also include art teaching that way, incorporate art, because a lot of children have artistic talents that in our cuts in the arts budgets, they don't have the space to express. They can make a poster for an answer. They can build something. They can make a painting of their family or whatever, some expression. So if we look into the PD for the interest-based teachers, how to pay more attention to individual interest of the kids, it's very easy. And that's why the gifted pedagogy, it's nothing magic. It's basically strength-based, interest-based, and it's been delivering to kids who are high ability, but it works for everyone and research is plentiful. In any case, it works for social emotional development too. And the teachers are excited teaching that way because they learn about their students. They see their students flourish. Oh, this student loves math. This student loves baseball. This one is an arts person.
Absolutely.
I don't know. It just works. And I'm sorry, I get excited.
Please don't apologize. You have your peers that are celebrating you in the chat, Bianca. So I hope you get the opportunity to go back and read that. And you know, John is definitely with you on this one.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Arts and he was there.
Okay.
So
thank you. Thank you, John. And thank you for raising that issue.
And thank you, Bianca. And I think this aligns very well with the framework of universal design for learning.
Yes.
What you have said is exactly what the universal design for learning framework is talking about. So thanks for bringing that up.
Absolutely. Multiple means of engagement, right? Representation and expression for sure. And just reiterating, you know, your focus of how can we best support our educators in really tapping into those students' interests. It can be done through project-based learning. There's tons of overlap and interdisciplines in terms of art, the sciences, right? And we know that with Bloom's taxonomy, the highest level of cognitive thinking is innovation, right? So
Totally.
what
And
opportunities?
the best thing is even without PD, teachers can do it because each teacher has their own pet peeve, has their own interest. They can teach from their interest. If they
Yeah.
are allowed, they should be allowed. Anyway, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we're going to go on to question 3. And you guys will all appreciate this. It continues to build on some of the ideas that we've already discussed today, right? So maximizing state level funds to support our students. So far, CSDE has allocated $11 million of the ARP ESSER funds in the form of summer programming grants, right, for local school districts and towns. And they have plans to provide statewide access to resources on the core content areas, ELA and math. And they're considering how can funding expand that comprehensive after-school programming, right? When we think about wraparound services, additional support for social, mental, and emotional health support, right? To address some of those challenges. So now they want to know, what ideas do you have that can address that impact of lost instructional time? And remember, it's quoted because these are the words from the feds, right? Our state uses the words accelerated learning. The academic impact of lost instructional time, provide summer learning and enrichment programming, and provide comprehensive after-school programs. And as you start to write your responses using the number 3 and then your response, think about, what does support look like for you, right? And how does it address those vulnerable students? And if it serves students who may have been the most disengaged this year, and we can define disengagement in a variety of ways. It can be that student who lacks access for one or more reasons, that student who is actually just not attending, whether in the virtual space or in person, full in-person models. Disengaged students are those students at risk of not attending for longer periods of time. And Smita, I think we also talked about the kids who are logging in and logging off last night, right?
Yes.
Have I covered them all? You want to add to that?
No, I think you got it. And it's more about enrichment learning than compensation learning, right?
Yes.
That's what came out last time. Right? Don't call it compensatory learning, call it enrichment learning. Because
Yes, and there's that need to distinguish, this is not an extended school year.
yes,
right?
yes.
These are additional enrichment supports. Thank you for bringing that into the space, Smita. So please help us by answering the question. I see we had a couple drop off, so I'm looking for a magic number of about 14 now. Add the number 3 and then your response to the space. You can do that in the chat, and as we get closer to the number 14, I will let you guys know when we're ready to take comments in the spoken form. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Suzanne, for modeling. I said Suzanne, but I think it's Susan. Susan. Thank you, Susan, for modeling. That's my Bronx. That's another thing you should know about me. There's this accent that I have from being a New Yorker. So occasionally I mispronounce things. And I will tell you, John, it is the only borough that has to be identified with the word "the" in front of it, denoting its importance to the city.
So true.
All right, keep them coming. We're almost at 10%. Right? What does support look like? I think of like my elementary school teacher days. What does it look like, feel like, sound like, right? So when you actually get the support that is supporting enrichment, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like to truly be able to support those vulnerable student needs and our disengaged student population? You can talk about both, or you can talk about one of those populations. Definitely your participation is considered as how you emphasize other folks' comments, as well as if it doesn't speak to you at all, you could just add no comment after the number 3. We're just about 15, almost 20%. Keep those ideas coming. Right, 5 responses, almost at 50%. We are at 9 responses, so almost at 75%, 10 responses. Ten responses. 11 responses. Just a big shout out to Joanne. It's good to see you on the line. Thank you, Jen R. You know it's coming back to you. We're at 12 responses. Just 2 more. So if you have a friend who hasn't responded yet, just lean in closely to the Zoom screen and give them the eye. There we go. 13 responses. So we'll let that last person work on their response in the space. And as we do that, I encourage you to raise your hand. You can do that with the Zoom reaction button. Raise your hand if you would like to say something into the space.
Joanne has raised her hand.
Hi, Joanne. Great to have you in the space today.
Sorry, I had unintended things that happened. I apologize to everybody, so I'm just jumping in on this question. But I think I looked at the last question when I saw it, and all from my perspective, and I focus on creating safe places for kids, working restoratively, focusing on the climate. We have so much trauma, we have so much inequity, and you know, now we're starting to hear less about that. We're hearing more about learning losses, and I think all paths converge on one key non-negotiable, and that's to create environments that are destinations. And you know, we can get into the weeds about what kids need because they're behind in math or science or whatever it is, but we need to support people. And it's not, in my view, social emotional learning, it's social emotional growth that we need to help facilitate. And it's not going to happen unless we focus and prioritize community building and relationship building. So, you know, I don't want any child not to be smart, but I'll tell you what, they won't show up if, you know, if we can get them there and then we hammer in, you have to do this, you have to do this, you're far behind, you've really got to, they won't show up or they'll shut down. And so I think that the academic impact, if we start to a slow creep of instructional time and ramp up teacher evaluation based on instructional time and so on, we're going to be worse off than we are now. So.
Thank you for bringing that into the space for us, Joanne. As a fellow educator who's followed your work over the years, I really appreciate you bringing that into the space. Really looking at engagement on a variety of levels, right? Because there's a trickle-down effect from the educators to the students. But really talking about the need to dial into those needs, right? So prior to the pandemic, restorative practices, we were focused on getting students to feel a part of those communities, right? And now it adds a new layer with this pandemic. We have students who've attended in a variety of different learning environments, and they need to be able to feel whole, right? And feel a part of a community, a learning community, and feel as though they can accomplish any task that their teachers throw their way. So thank you for bringing that into the space. Looking at time, I'm going to take John, and then I'm going to take Susan. Go ahead, John.
Thank you.
Unmute.
Thank you, LaTanya. I'll try and be brief. This is a societal and systemic issue. We have over time always asked more than we should of our educators to handle issues that need to be covered across many societal spheres. The business community must step up in a big way to, if we say that education and our children is truly a priority, then we need to follow the models of other countries where they show what that priority looks like. The concept of mom and dad going to work while the kids are in a sort of daycare system, which is our schools, is really unfortunate. When you have children, parents and families need to have the support that allows them the opportunity to work with their children, with their teachers, with their school systems, to provide the kind of supports and education that really show that they are a priority. So the business community has to be a part of this, and we've talked to them in a number of ways. They have the resources. They need to change their mode of thinking about what our schools are and can do and contribute.
Absolutely, John. Thank you for bringing that into the space, right? So really digging deep, and maybe CSDE can help facilitate development, if not strengthening, of those partnerships with community partners, as well as our business leaders, right? And I appreciate you drawing the attention to comparative education, right? So let's not just look to our neighboring states, but let's look to neighboring countries and seeing what they're doing and what works well, and how can we bring some of that back home? Absolutely. Thank you so much. Susan, you have your hand raised. I'm going to let you have the last word on this question before we go to the next.
Great, thank you. You know, Joanne and John, thank you for your comments. They are very, very necessary to be heard, and very important. The social emotional growth of our students is important, and our communities need to step up. I want to speak more to how we could support our teachers and our students through providing them with long-term career opportunities in our state. Currently, any given time in our state, we have 5,000 computer science positions available. We are not providing our students with the needed education in this area. Only 8% of our high schools teach computer science in the state. And I feel strongly that we need to have some strong teacher professional development in this area if our state is to keep pace with our neighboring states. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to garnish some of these funds to just start doing this work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for drawing that attention to the sciences, right? Which I just know from my days in elementary school, sometimes that's like the special as opposed to the core part of curriculum. So, you know, what attention can be drawn to the sciences, to STEAM, to STEM, right? And possibly I'm hearing college and career pathways for kiddos, and professional learning opportunities so that the educators can support them with that. Thank you so much for bringing that into the space. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else?
No, science is all about discovery and inquiry, and it's artistic as any other discipline. It's often overlooked.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that into the space. Smita, I'm going to save the chat, and I think we're ready for question 4.
Okay.
And we're doing great on time. So my goal is when we get to question 5, that there's an opportunity for us to capture all of our responses for question 5, but also any final words related to that question or other questions or other comments brought into the space, allowing everyone to speak into the space. That's the
Can you
goal.
see question 4?
Not at question 4 yet.
What happened to my slideshow? Oh my God. Now
It
can you
looks like
see?
your question 4 might be missing. Do you want me to try to share mine? It was there. I know it because I saw it last night.
I saw it there too. I can see it on my screen, but I can't see. There's something wrong with my computer.
All right, so I'm going to share my slide. It's no biggie. Let's make sure I actually get to the presentation. There we go. Okay. Is this a good viewing size for everyone? Because my Zoom screen just changed. Yes. All right. If you are having challenges, please unmute and let me know. All right. So
good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So as far as supporting LEAs, which for those of us who are not educators, it stands for local education agencies. So those local school districts or regional boards of education, how can we best support them in planning for and meeting our students' needs, right? So we know that thus far, CSDE has been able to provide guidance or a roadmap to districts in setting state level priorities and definitely publishing guidance documents that have been supporting this effort. They've also supported school districts in providing ample technical support from a variety of sources. And they've engaged in, I would like to say, multiple webinars and multiple communications with districts on their development of local school district plans, right? And so as we think about this role as leaders of education in the state, how might you best describe the role of CSDE in supporting school districts in developing their high quality plans, right? Because CSDE's role in the ARP ESSER funds is, you know, the 101 million, but the remaining of that money has been dispersed across school districts. So what kind of role are they playing in developing the high quality plans for their use of their ARP ESSER funds, right? How can they support school districts in their use of developing those high quality plans for the ARP ESSER funds? You can do so by answering the question 4. If this doesn't connect with you at all, you could say no comment. You could also put number 4 in your answer.
Thank you, Shelly, for doing that.
And Smita, because my screen view changed, I'm really going to rely on you to tell me if we're ready to take spoken comment.
Yeah. We have 3 comments so far, and everybody said no comment.
Okay. I think they're really getting ready for question 5, which is okay, right? The more time we have with that, the better.
So we've got 6 comments.
Okay. Keep those comments coming.
Yes, we've got about 8 comments
19.
now. 8.
Almost at 50%. Keep them coming. Right? We're really thinking about what the role of the State Department of Education plays in supporting our local school districts to develop their high quality plans for the ARP ESSER funds.
We've got 10 comments.
All right, we are almost at 75%. Keep those ideas rolling in. And if you're someone who has already added a comment to the space and you think that you're ready to speak into the space, you can raise your hand and Smita will help me to identify who speaks into the space next.
Yes, I can do that. No one has the, so we've got about 14 comments.
Okay. All right, so we're at 100%. If you would like to elaborate on your comment or speak to a comment that you've noticed in the chat, please do so by raising your hand and Smita will ask you to unmute.
Joanne, can you unmute yourself?
Sure. I have the privilege from time to time of listening in when district leaders talk about these things, and they are buried under one report, another, and without much guidance. And it's just so time consuming, and they're unhappy. And so I would highly recommend that they be more, the State Department be more of a facilitator. And, you know, even currently the awarding of forms of dollars and how applications are chosen. In some districts, they sail by, and others people nitpick. And so there's not a lot of consistency, and it's just eating up time. And I think that the best thing that the State Department could do, having worked there for many years, is to ask school districts what they need from them. And then either say, we can't do that, and be very open about it. You're on your own. But more importantly, if there are wonderful ideas out in the districts, they're doing wonderful things. And if that could be, if they could post those things as opposed to nitpicking and going back and forth, depending upon the consultant that is tied to it, I think that districts would have a lot more time to do this stuff, as opposed to just constant, I got another deadline, the State Department wants this, the State Department wants that. And I don't know that there's much of what the State Department's doing with it, other than sort of, you know, just being a repository and maybe even more of a black hole. And I don't mean that in a negative, well, it sounds that way, but what I'm saying is, you know, districts are dying under the weight of all the requirements, and they need time to implement.
Yeah, we're talking about digestible chunks, right? And possibly the difference between being data rich and data saturated, right? Where there's so much information coming in, and it's hard for anyone almost to use all of the information well at the same time. So definitely in their support to, I also heard from you the opportunity to really survey, right? In its most simplest form, what the needs are from those school districts as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add?
No, but I think that when you don't have to hear from every district. I mean, this is the kind of thing that, you know, you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it. This is a survey that we want to be able to help. It's optional. If you want some help, if you want to be silent, I just, yeah. And Marie says here, you know, should work with districts, find out their individual needs. And yeah, that notion of one size fits all. For a while, there was talk of the State Department collecting data on childhood trauma. I mean, what are you going to do with that? And where's the consistency? And I mean, I think that there's far more, oh, this might be helpful at some point, as opposed to, we got real problems out there. You got a pandemic to get over. You got learning losses. You've got inequities. You've got all of those things. And I think that we lose the forest for the trees sometimes when we ask for one more report and one more report and one more, you know, that's just my vantage point. Sorry. I guess I'm a little jaded because I'm old.
We appreciate the expertise that comes with your age. So thank you so much for bringing that into the space. We're going to turn it over to you, John.
John.
Wait, you're on mute.
There we go.
There we go. We got you.
Thank you for that, LaTanya. So boards, parents across the state have absolutely been frustrated and angry in many cases. And without going into a lot of detail, the State Department, if they could come up with a mechanism, whether it's a badge on a school district's website or some kind of indicator that, yes, the district has met its obligation to file a plan that's required, or yes, the district has done the following, or as Joanne said, maybe there's an optional badge where if something was an option, yes, this district has submitted survey results, then parents who access the district's website would have one less thing to complain about when they come to a Board of Ed meeting, and would know that their school district is doing what is being asked of them. That would be a huge help.
And I love your constant influence of art there with the badges, John. But really, right, when we think about communication, to the point that you made earlier, how are we making that visible in terms of the school districts? Sometimes things are happening and families don't know. And these are really good efforts for them on behalf of their schools and their school districts. So absolutely. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I think I could go on and on, so I'm going to just not.
All right, save it for question 5, John. We're going to share the mic. Do we have another before we move forward to question 5?
No, we are good. Thank you.
All right, if
We don't have
anyone
any,
hasn't.
we don't have anybody's hand raised.
Okay. All right, so with that being said, we will move to question 5. And I'm looking at you, Smita, like you're going to move the slide and it's totally me this time.
Yes, it's you. We changed it, remember?
Yes, I do.
My
All
computer got stuck.
So I think this has already come out in a lot of your comments that you've made earlier, and this is an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper, become a little bit more explicit when we talk about what it takes to support the educator workforce, right? So we know that so far, CSDE's approach has been to recognize the need for qualified and well-trained educator workforce. They've made allowances for daily and long-term substitutes and an expansion of pathways for paraeducators to become educators. In partnership with the Regional Educational Service Center Alliance, the RESC, they've developed a mentoring team program. And they've invested in partnerships to inspire young generations from diverse populations to join the workforce. So with that work already being laid out for us, how might CSDE best support the educator workforce? You can think about it both in supporting the current educators to address their students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs, as well as how do we recruit that diverse pool of new educators to fill vacancies that have been caused by the pandemic. So when you answer this question, you could do so by putting the number 5. And I know that it's a multiple layered question. So if it works for you to say 5A and 5B, go right ahead. Also remember that if you don't have a comment, this question doesn't resonate with you, you can actually respond by putting number 5 and no comment. And also we appreciate, I saw tons of collaboration on the last question. And even when folks spoke into the space, there are definitely comments there. So if you spoke, please go back and check out the comments that your peers have left for you. But definitely, how do we support the current educator workforce, and how do we build that dream, right, of a more diverse pool of new educators? And once we get our comments, let's see how many participants. We're back to 19, Smita, so I think we're roughly 16. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think we are.
No, I think it's less now, right?
Yeah, it's 14.
14.
There are 5 of us.
Okay. 5 of our in-house crew folks have joined us in the space.
Yeah, there are 5 of us.
All right, I'm looking to you, Smita, to let me know how many have responded.
Only 2.
Okay. 2 out of 14. We're almost at 20%. I love how this like forces me to use math skills I haven't used in a while. Keep those ideas coming.
And so far we only have 2.
Okay.
I think people are thinking and typing or formulating their thoughts.
I love it. And we are trained educators, right? So we can provide the appropriate wait time. And we're doing really well on time. We actually have 30 minutes left to our session together. So definitely take your time, and we look forward to hearing your voices next as well. I'm also hoping too, because I see new faces in the space, that we'll get an opportunity to hear from those voices as well.
So we have about 6 comments.
Okay. 6 out of 14. We're almost at 50%.
7. Now we are at 50%. 7.
50%. Keep them coming. And just kudos to all of you for just really sharing some great ideas. We look forward to sharing this data with the State Department of Education. And just a reminder, everything that you speak into the space, as well as what you write, those will be captured and shared with our partners.
And we have about 9.
Okay, almost at 75%.
And there's some people who are agreeing to each other's comments.
Yes.
So I'm not
Yes.
counting those.
No. We're not counting them towards reaching our 100%, but we
No.
are counting them
Yeah.
towards feedback.
That's what I meant, sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
And thanks for the clarification.
No problem. I love working with you, Smita, but I have to tell you, I could work with this group for another hour if we had the time. We have such a phenomenal group of individuals from across the state. Right, so again, we're thinking about the educator workforce as a 2-part question, right? How do we help our current educators, right? And how do we develop that diverse pool of future educators? And as you formulate those answers, think about some of the things that you've already said in the beginning and how it really leans into that workforce development. How are we doing now, Smita?
I think we are there. Because we
100%.
yeah.
If we haven't reached it yet, we'll allow those final voices to add their thoughts into the comment, add their comments and their thoughts into the space. I think that's my June brain again. So if you are interested in bringing your voice into the space, we have time. We want to hear your voices. We want to listen to you. You can respond to this question, or you can respond to another question or other idea that's been presented in the space today. You can do so by clicking your reaction button if you have the latest version of Zoom, and you can raise your hand and Smita will help us to identify who goes next. And if you have the less recent version of Zoom, you might find it by clicking on participants, and there'll be options for you to raise your hand. So without that being further ado, who would ever like to speak next, please raise your hand. And Smita, I'll turn to you to help us identify that person.
Yes, the floor is open now. So Joanne, would you like
Yes.
to unmute yourself? And
I don't really want to dominate this conversation, but seeing as nobody else raised their hand yet, let me just speak up. You know, children are whole people, and as our educators, and educators we don't go into this business for the money. We go into it because we love what we do and we love the people we work with. And when people leave, it's usually because they're unhappy. And that's why, I mean, or they're moving up the ladder or something like that. But just the general teacher where there's a lot of churn, there's generally low morale, bad climate, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that if we want to support the workforce, we need to help them understand what is a priority. And this has to be, you know, people are saying SEL. I don't see it as SEL. Again, I see it as social emotional growth, social emotional health. And people have to know how to do it. And I don't see it as being a program. This is, we can do wonderful programs, but that's not what this is. This is how you do what you do. And unless environments are safe, and I call them restorative because that means high expectations coupled with high support every single day and safe. I think about Mr. Rogers. If those are the kind of environments, then we're going to support the workforce. We're going to have people from every walk of life, diverse pool, diversity on many levels, want to be there. So it goes back to destination.
Thank you so much for sharing that in the space, Joanne. Are there others who would like to add on to her ideas, present a new idea, or talk about something that came up earlier in our dialogue today? What are your final words? Please raise your hand.
Shelly, did you have your hand raised?
I did. I just wanted to speak to, and thank you for this forum. You know, this has been a year for all people in education. And I just want to speak to the paraeducators that are in the district that have stepped up and have worked real hard. They've had to step out of the box. And so I'm looking at the funding that's coming in, and I'm hoping that part of this money will be used as an investment, earmarked for professional development for paraeducators. You know, every year it's always there's no money, but I think for the skills and things that we had to really find out on our own and be able to be helpful to do this year during the pandemic, I think now is the opportunity for paraeducators to be utilize the services that we have. And so I'm hoping that that will come out of this, that we can put part of the money to side for them, because they work with the teachers. They're the ones that understand our special needs kids. And sometimes we're the ones to alert teachers to a lot of things that are going on. So I don't want paraeducators to be left out of this move forward for education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that into the space, Shelley. And I think they were intentional about using the word educator, right, as opposed to specific roles, but you're absolutely right. Just being a mom of a child with a special need, as well as someone who's support paraeducator training in the past year, we definitely know, I think stepped it up is an understatement, right? But I think that's the resilience that's within the force. But now how can we go back and invest in our paraeducators who really are sometimes leaders of those instructional pathways for kids? So thank you so much for bringing that into the space. Are there any other thoughts? How are we supporting the educator workforce through ARP ESSER funding? Are there thoughts that you'd like to expand on in the space? Ideas that we've already addressed earlier? You can raise your hand and Smita will call on you.
Rosalind, you have your hand raised.
Yes. So I just wanted, and I did write in the comment, I think the state should create a waiver for students who are done with their completion of their education program, but then they have to go in student teaching. I think that it's important to get more students to do that. In colleges, you know, it has to come from the state that would agree to cover those, waive that for those students who are the shortest areas, like bilingual education, TESOL, math, science. So if they're completed their coursework and all they have to do is do their student teaching in the fall, guess what? Let's waive it. Let's hire them and do the same thing we did with nurses.
Absolutely, Rosalind. There's an opportunity for looking at creatively how we can accelerate, right, that certification process. And those of you who are not educators, Rosalind is really speaking to the internship, which is a part of completing a teacher preparation program. So if we have future educators that is their only requirement before they graduate, Rosalind is really speaking to the innovative idea of waiving that requirement due to the need, right? John, you're up next. If you can unmute and bring your voice into the space.
Thank you, LaTanya. So when we talk about equity and we talk about effective teaching and learning, I think we've sort of mentioned, and others have supported the fact that the infusing individual strengths of educators into their work in the classroom is a way to make the experience more authentic for the children, and as a way to engage the children. I think to add on to that, using real life experiences, which could include things like we're renovating a school, so there's math and science opportunities, or any number of things that happen on a day-to-day basis, and building on that for children so that it's not something that happens just within the four walls of the classroom and then they leave and they don't expand or apply it. The concept again of applying, infusing the arts into all disciplines is not only good for engaging children, but it makes the work of the educator more enjoyable. And they're going to bring their true self to the work that they do and be more effective as an educator. So I think however much we can support that, whether it's, and it needs to truly be not just bringing in an artist to play a song in the gym or all-purpose room. It needs to be infused throughout the process of teaching and learning. Is going to make a huge difference. And then the comment that was supported also earlier around making this a societal thing. I always was under the impression that this pandemic really bared the sort of faults and was an opportunity to make some huge shifts in this age-old process of education, and where we could see some dramatic change. I know districts are doing that to some extent, but we should have the freedom to really say, wow, we never knew that this kind of adaptation that we were forced to do has made such a difference. Let's continue it, let's build on it, and let's make this work for us across the board. So those are just a few of the thoughts that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who have spoken already, we really appreciated the opportunity for you to speak into the space, and we've enjoyed all of your participation. So Smita, help me out. Who's next?
There's nobody next.
If you're having trouble using the raise hand feature, you can do so by speaking into the space, and you can unmute yourself. And if there's a challenge, right, we'll just figure it out for you who goes first.
I don't see anybody unmuting themselves. Oh, Bianca has just raised her hand.
There we go. Bianca, please unmute and bring your voice into the space.
Hi again. I'm only speaking because nobody else is, and I think I spoke a lot.
But that's courage,
also,
right?
I wanted to account for my
Bianca?
accent. Yes, I'm Polish.
Well, thank you for bringing that today.
From a little farther than Brooklyn, but
just a little bit, right?
yes.
Just the ocean dividing us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, not anymore. But I just wanted to reiterate what John said and support that. It's I believe that we pay attention to the teachers in the wrong way. We pay attention to the teachers for monitoring them rather than giving them freedom. We're not empowering our teachers. I'm from a different culture. I was raised across the ocean, and when I look at teachers here, I think they are absolute heroes. I don't know how they do their work, buried under this enormous amount of requirements. Everywhere you look, there is some type of a requirement, some type of a report, some type of accountability measure. The teachers' creativity, I'm afraid, is being really buried. And like John said, let's allow, and you know, when you look at the best systems, we always give Norway as an example, but there are a lot of others around the world. Teachers are treated as true professionals that they are. And that means giving them agency in their classroom, and let the teacher in the next class, let's say the third year teacher, should be accountable for the progress the students are making at the end of the year. So then the fourth grade teacher would come to them and say, oh my God, you've done such a great job with these kids. They are really, they covered all the material. I can go to my programming now. Thank you. Or come and say, hey, Bianca, what have you done to this kid? Why don't they know half of the program? And then the teacher may say, well, you know, maybe I tried, or they were delayed. And that way the teachers share experience. Instead of bury the teachers in reporting, allow teachers to collaborate more, talk to each other, exchange, that time spent on writing at the desk, let them spend talking to each other, talking about the students, about the challenges that the student has. Maybe they have discovered an interest in a student. Tell the teacher in the next level classroom, Johnny loves painting. Let him use it. This kid loves math to the point that they could probably even do a mathematical painting for arts class. I mean, there should be the ability, and that way everybody, the teachers would be happy because they would know their role is to work on the kids. So when they go to the next classroom, then the teacher will come to them and say, oh my God, you're such a good teacher. I don't know. I'm just spewing thoughts and I'm sorry, I'm taking the time, but I think really it's very simple. Happy teacher, happy student. And if the teacher comes because they couldn't sleep because they had to work half of the night on some reporting, they don't have the time to find out about their students and give the heart to their students and to see why is Johnny at the end of the class of the classroom, you know, not paying attention. Maybe they are hungry, maybe they feel like they didn't do their work, so they are shy and they know that they will be badly judged if that comes out. I don't know. Social emotional learning governs all. In any case, thank you for giving me the forum to speak here and for doing this discussion.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Susan, you have your hand raised.
Great, thank you. Bianca, having been a classroom teacher, I know what you're speaking of. I'm going to speak to the first and the last point on the slide. And, you know, I want to speak to having a well-trained educator workforce. And how do we do that when we have students in school that are going to enter a workforce for jobs that we don't even know that are out there yet. And, you know, a lot of ways, this is an investment in our country and our state to prepare our teachers who will be preparing our students for situations and jobs and a society that, by the way, that we don't even know what it's going to look like. And I'm going to, you know, harp back on that. You know, we really strongly need to provide some teacher training for our teachers in the area of computer science, because there isn't an industry that isn't touched by this anymore. You know, if you walk a manufacturing plant, and, you know, nowadays it's very different. These guys are holding, I shouldn't say guys, these people are holding, you know, Android devices in their hands and programming on the fly to make their machine operate more efficiently. When we look at nurses, they have the same devices in their hands when they need to titrate medication for their patients. we're not providing the type of foundational education in computer science that we need to provide for our students. And we have to start doing that with training our teachers, teaching them how to integrate computer science like you would integrate art into a regular core classroom. This is the tool that it is. You know, we need to move our students away from thinking that their devices are tools only for socializing and only for gaming. You know, our phones that we hold in our hands are little mini computers, and they can do a lot of things. They're not a pastime, it's a tool. And let's teach them how to use their tools so we can give them good career opportunities when they leave school.
Thank you for bringing that, Susan. I do a lot of training on computer, on technology, and I always stress to my educators that this is not a fun thing. You have the world in your hand. The phone that you have is the world, and you can do so much more. Especially for our kids with disabilities, they can access the entire world through that. Thank you for bringing that to me. That really resonated with me because I do a lot of PD on using technology. Thank you so much.
Yep, I knew that was going to hit home for you, Smita. I was looking down there. I was like, is Smita going to say something? I see Rosalind next.
Yes.
And I also see John. John, I'm just going to ask for folks after Rosalind who haven't spoken yet to say something. And then if no one raises their hand, then we're probably going to go to you, okay? So we're going to let Rosalind go first. Rosalind, you can unmute, bring your voice into the space.
Yep, and I'll be short and sweet. So I think just, you know, recognizing the need of qualifying well-trained educator force, I think that the state should require those incoming graduated students, undergraduates who will become teachers, they really need to require some coursework in the race area and equity. As we know, the majority of us who are educators, I'm an educator, we're the minority in terms of teachers, right? In our state is becoming very diverse. And it's extremely important that these teachers receive some race training in terms of race, courageous conversation, as well as administrators. So if we have teachers becoming administrators, the state should actually not waive and ensure that colleges provide some coursework before becoming an administrator and becoming a teacher. Also, in addition to that, the state really needs to consider highly providing, again, coursework in the area of English learners, special education. You know, when I say special education, I mean in social, emotional behavior issues the students may encounter, and all these different issues. So I think that it's just very important to have educators. We know that the majority of educators who are going to be, we know they're white. And they're going to be dealing with a diverse group of students. We know we have students from all kinds of religions as well, right? So it's very important that as they come in to work with all of our students, these educators are actually prepared and at least have some background knowledge to ensure equity among all of our students.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosalind, for bringing that into the space, right? Because we know that our state data says that out of the 53 roughly 100,000 FTE positions, only 10% of those are educators of color, right? So there's a need to look at equity on both ends, right? How do we support increasing that workforce of that less than 10% that are educators of color? And then also, how do we equip our white peers, right? Who do make up the majority, 90%? How can we help them to really grow in their own personal development and growth in the work? Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that into the space, Rosalind. And we're just going to inquire if there's anyone who hasn't spoken yet who wants to speak, because if not, I'm going to turn it over to John. Do you see any other hands, Smita?
No, I don't see any other hands.
All right, John, we're waiting for you. Unmute, please bring your voice into the space.
Thank you, Latanya. This will be really quick. Previous comments mentioned treating teachers as the professionals they are. I have to preface what I'm about to say by telling you that I'm a strong supporter of unions, and teachers wouldn't have what they have today if they didn't belong to a professional association, the teachers unions. But you want to attract people to the profession, how about teaching them as, treating them as professionals so that they don't have to use sick time to go to the bank, so they don't have to do life business by violating some provision of their collective bargaining agreement. So that may be a legislative issue. It certainly can be a local bargaining issue. That makes it all the more difficult. I think it should be legislated. And there are places where professionalism shows in how you treat your workforce. And so that's a pretty important thing as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely. And what a great last word, right? To be able to treat educators as the professionals and treat our workforce, give them the things that they need, the tools, right? Resources on all layers. Do we have any other comments? We have about 5 minutes left. So if you haven't said anything into the space and you would like to, please raise your hand or unmute to bring your voice into the space. If you're just a little less courageous, but still want to share your thoughts, you have additional thoughts, please drop them into the chat before you go.
So, John, there's a comment from Bianca for you. She wants you to connect with her because she works with legislators. So if you could connect with Bianca at some point, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, we have our friend Smita. Smita, please unmute, bring your voice into the space. You'll be our final word before we go. And
Thank
just
you
before
so
you begin,
much.
I just want to thank everyone for just bringing just amazing perspectives and experiences into the space today. All right, Smita, you got it.
Thank you so
Take the
much.
floor.
Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you for having this conversation and allowing us to talk. I am only going to reiterate my earlier request that when you do bring up this meeting notes to whoever are going to be the decision makers, it's a very, very absolute need for them to consider this, that there is an absolute need for remote learning at this time for families. We are in a very big minority, but this is so stressful. I mean, no parent wants to keep their child home, as I said before, and it is very difficult for the schools and the teachers to do remote learning, and it's equally hard for the families to do remote learning as well because the children are very small. But the one thing that I want to tell the decision makers is that at this time, if we understand why we need to do this, then and we all work as a team, it is certainly possible. I, being from India, just to give you an example, the schools have been closed down there for the last 2 years, and in spite of that, all the children are doing extremely well on the education front because of an excellent remote platform that they have introduced for kids starting from preschool up to college. And this was only possible to do because the teachers were motivated and they were provided with the tools and the knowledge on how to address the challenges that come up with remote learning. And the children were motivated and helped by their teachers and their parents. So all I'm trying to say here is that this is not the way we want to educate our kids, but given the medical circumstances and family circumstances, we are forced to request for this option. And it's my humble request to the state lawmakers and decision makers that they need to provision for families like us and not leave us alone just having to deal with the consequences. Because as I said to you before, I have been extensively researching for options on my own. There is no option existing in the state of Connecticut. And at this point, if the state does not offer my children some provision, I will have to end up going out of state. I'll have to end up going private. And that's something that not all of us can afford. So since the federal government has provided us with resources, I think if you understand the need and are convinced, then everything can happen. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Smita, for helping us finish out with that parent lens. And some of your peers are definitely celebrating your response as well. So check that out. Again, just thanking each of you for taking the time out to be here with us. I know some of us were traveling, but we were able to make it in this space together. CSDE will continue to have these dialogues, so be on the lookout for that. And I think there's also something in the works in regards to publicly sharing what they were able to collect from these sessions. So thank you so much all for your participation. Have a great day.
And thank
and
you,
an amazing
thank you,
weekend.
Latanya. Thank you, Smita, for your facilitation. And thank you all for your participation. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the beautiful sun today. The weekend is going to be amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
So where can I find the recording?
So did you choose, did it give you an option to record to the cloud?